Yo, I'm Doc Winter, EVP of Urban Programming for iHeartMedia and Program Director of Real 92.3 LA. In honor of Black Music Month, Hennessy and Real 92.3 have convened a panel of experts to talk about hip-hop since its inception. So as long as I've been in the game, hip-hop and Hennessy have gone hand in hand, and I hope you enjoy what we're about to see. So in honor of Black Music Month, Hennessy and Real 92.3 in LA has convened this board of radio celebrities to have a conversation about black music, right? Yeah. So I'm Doc Winter. I'm the EVP of Urban Programming for iHeart. DJ Head, who is a half of our night show. I'm just doing what he said to do. Is that what you want me to do?
I'm talking about keep all this. Let's have some personality. Right.
I'm not letting you guys.
Why are you looking over to
I'm not letting you guys talk.
Yeah,
So that's Head. I don't know who this guy is, but that's Chuck Dizzle, who, along with DJ Head, Homegrown Radio has been a fixture in the LA community. And the guy who's kind of responsible for me being here in LA, Big Boy, the voice of LA. And so I was telling Big earlier, I started this conversation as the somewhat elder statesman in the room. I got you guys by a couple of months. So when I asked these guys, what was the first hip hop record played? And Chuck and Head said,
Rapper's Delight.
Wrong.
And I still don't believe you when you say that. So what was the first one?
Fatback Band. You guys remember the Fatback Band?
No, I do
you remember
not.
Fatback Band?
No, I don't.
And a song called King Tim III actually came out 2 months before Rapper's Delight. And I was in radio at the time, and I played the record. And growing up in New York, I was accustomed to seeing MCs rap. All mixers had an MC with them back then. And so the MCs would rap and the DJs would mix. And so, I'm on the radio in Connecticut. I'm like, oh man, they finally put it on a record. Right. And so King Ting III comes out. We're banging it in Connecticut. And then a couple months later, Rapper's Delight came out, and it just kind of took off from there. And that was 1979, which is crazy.
So does that makes it the first rap record because it's the first one recorded,
or? It was the first one recorded. The first one to have commercial success was actually Rapper's Delight. But I remember King Tim III because I thought the record was banging.
Fatback Band, but even with my history, Doc, I would have given it to Rapper's Delight, or if there was something else that I missed, but that was it.
Yeah. And so tell me about, because obviously I didn't grow up in LA, I grew up in New York, and again, that was the experience for us back in the 70s. You went to a club, there was a DJ, and then there was an MC, and they rapped. So like 79, 80. And then so the hip hop thing begins to explode. So what was happening in LA around that time? What was the?
Well, we were babies, Doc. When you talk about your years, we were babies. Maybe they weren't even born.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But what's the year stamped on your birth certificate?
84.
Yeah. So all
Maybe
right.
3.
So
Whatever.
No, but like when Rapper's Delight hit, I just fell in love with hip hop. You know what I'm saying? If that was what it was then, that was the first time I heard somebody say turntable. You know what I'm saying? When she heard stories and she heard fables and Vicious on the mic and the turntable. And I remember just walking to the boys club and Boys and Girls Club, and it was like me and my boy Trevor would just do those lines. You know what I'm saying? It sound new and familiar at the same time because it wasn't like somebody was singing, and Rapper's Delight was just everywhere in LA. You know what I'm saying? And every kid knew it. And it wasn't like we had 100 different radio stations and 300 satellite and streaming channels and all this stuff. You just had radio. And when something was introduced, especially something that felt so new at the time, everybody gravitated towards it. All ages, man. And it was just something new and something exciting. And I think that was like my introduction to this thing called hip hop. And I just started to really study it. Like, with super rhymes and everything that came after that, and then the explosions of the Run DMCs, and but I always been kind of just a child of hip hop. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not pseudo for me because I was there.
So when did it first become a part of your life? You guys are 84 babies?
Yeah, I'm 83. My sister, she graduated in 92. So I just remember the first thing for me where it really attached was Dr. Dre. You know, it wasn't not even the NWO. It was Dr. Dre when he got signed to Death Row. So I remember him and Eazy-E going back and forth, and that being such a big deal.
So you talking about more like the Chronic?
Yeah, the Chronic.
Wow.
The Chronic. And it was such a big deal for me because going to the Rhodium Swap Meet and buying the cassette of Dre Day and hearing the unedited version of a song of Dre Day, I'm like, this ain't what they say on the radio.
Right.
Like, so I just remember that being a big deal. Like, oh, they cussing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my first.
And that was
attachment.
turf talk too.
Yeah.
That was here. You know what I'm saying? So what about you, Head?
I think mine was definitely around. I would say Chronic between Chronic and 2001, somewhere in there. Like I'm definitely a 2001 baby. Like 2001 Marshall Mathers LP.
Wow.
You know, documentary. That's when I really like got entrenched into it. Before that, I was going through life and I couldn't really tap in like that. But I think that kind of is what altered my perspective on things out here specifically, because I was too young to catch the Tupac wave and too young to catch the Death Row. I was seeing everything going on in the streets and whatnot because my uncles was heavily in the streets, but I never was around it like that because my mom kind of kept me tucked. But when I did get involved, it was downhill.
It was more back in the days. You had like, you know, your Run DMCs. I was always like a fan of Melly Mel. You know what I'm saying? Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, Melly Mel and the Furious Five. And this is before I fell in love with like Rakim and Big Daddy Kane, and LL Cool J is like one of my favorite artists. So it's crazy when you hear 90, you know, oh, it was Chronic for me, you know, and that, you know, I think everybody got a time when they got in line
Doggy Style
for this thing called hip hop. And with Doggy Style, I remember Doggy Style, even to this day, me and Dog would talk about, that was of course before radio for me. I had a Cadillac with no registration, and I would just dip and play it, you know, and play What's My Name. And then when I got on with the Far Side as bodyguard, our first trip to London, we were across the street from the label, and that's the first place I got Doggy Style, the album, because you knew it was coming. And you had an introduction to from Snoop and Dre with Deep Cover, then the Chronic, and this new guy from Long Beach, and then it was like, well, his album's coming. So the anticipation on waiting for that and seeing what the West Coast was starting to do.
It was really different on the East Coast because all of those guys were famous already. If you went to a club, they were in the club. So Big Daddy Kane, all of those guys were famous in the club, and all of a sudden they started putting out records. And I know for me, when I became exposed to the West Coast, because after going to college in Connecticut, I moved to St. Louis. And St. Louis was like right in the middle of the country. But yeah, exactly. But it took more of the West Coast sensibilities. So then I started getting introduced to the West Coast. And I was like, man, like New York thought that it had hip hop on lock. But I was like, yo, this LA sound is crazy. And then the second biggest thing for me was having a chance to sit down and interview Tupac for, what was the movie he did with Janet Jackson?
Poetic Justice.
Poetic Justice, man. I don't think I've ever been as impressed with an individual as I was with him, man. He was so well read, so well spoken. And I was like, man, I thought at that time that LA was the center of hip hop, even though I grew up in New York City, just being so impressed with him.
Now, did you have a sense of, oh, they're taking it from us when it comes from hip hop? Because obviously it is a New York sound, it is a New York way.
Don't really answer that because you're in LA now.
I just got the sense that people in New York felt like, you know, the world was ours and this was our thing we created, nobody else could duplicate it. And I think that probably led to the demise of New York being the epicenter of hip hop at some point, because
I think
lost.
People still feel that to this day with the way that hip hop is guarded by us, you know what I'm saying? Where at one point it probably was New York saying, man, this is ours. And then when, you know, West Coast, South, whatever it is, I think it's a little different now, because now it could be, man, they're not taking care of hip hop. It's always been something. You know what I'm saying? And it's probably like, man, they pissing on plaques and they not taking care of hip hop. So I think it's always going to be something, because you tend to protect what you love and what you in love with. You know what I'm saying? So I think that hip hop, we've seen an evolution of mine, ours, here, you know what I'm saying? And it's been this protection. And I think now, I think heads are pretty much on like, man, what are we doing with it too? You
I
know?
can't say this about black music having been around for a number of decades. I think every generation had a problem with
The previous.
the new music.
Yeah.
I was born in '61, so when funk hit and Motown hit, they had a problem with, you know, the people from the '60s had a problem with that music. Then the '70s came, and the people in the '80s, when funk came, they had a problem with the '70s. And I just learned, man, you have to accept everybody else's, you know.
And you have to, and that helps you in radio and in life as well. You know what I'm saying? What I play in my car may not necessarily be what I play
Right.
on the air.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And I think that we're in a position where, you know, everyone is kind of like, at some point, I remember hip hop. That's not
Yeah.
real music.
Yeah.
All they doing is boogity boogity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you look up now, and when it comes to not just black music, when it comes to music, it's the biggest genre.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I remember being in an interesting space, like what y'all talking about, as far as not accepting it, because I'm caught in between two generations. I'm right in between the hardcore gangster shit, and then right before like the jerk. So
Yeah.
I'm like in the middle of it's some street shit, but but it's like right in the middle. So I can relate to the new turned up, rowdy, ratchet, you know, whatever. Then also I got a whole bunch of homies that's still in the streets.
Yeah.
And so they refuse to accept
Yeah, man.
smaller clothes, you know, jeans, the new music, mumble rap, right, all that kind of stuff. But then I have the newer guys, and they're like, man, we not rocking with the old. That shit's old, and it's like
Yeah, the Great Divide is crazy.
it just I feel like hip hop, we're the only ones who cannibalize our own music like that. Nobody else does that.
Yeah.
Like in no other genre. of
Somebody,
music.
you never hear people really saying, "Oh, that's not real this and real that,"
Right.
you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
And we kind of tend to, you know, fire at our own. It's friendly fire with sometimes when it comes to hip hop. But
It's interesting that you say that too, but because even with me being as young as I am, or at the time, I remember when West Coast rap was not accepted. Even that was the first genre that I really listened to. But then when the South came in, a lot of people wasn't accepting that.
Yeah.
But me looking at it saying like, wait, no, I remember they was calling rap music crap music, and they was calling it Jerry Curl rap.
Yeah.
In the 80s
I
and
remember
90s.
it used to be that West Coast shit.
Yeah.
You know,
Right,
and that's
right.
that West Coast shit. That's that, you know, and just being cut from a cloth of, you know, what LA's about, gang banging, you know, low ride and all that. You know what I'm saying? It was like when we start to recognize our own too, you know what I'm saying? It was like, oh shit, like the King T's and, you know, before the Easy E's, MC, you know, it was like when I heard King T say a blue rag in one of his raps, where that was like, you see it now, everybody red rags and all that shit, but it was so like, oh shit, the Cadillac, damn, I got a Cadillac. You know what I'm saying? It was a song called The Genius Is Back with Mix Master Spade. When that motherfucker say, I spent $300 and made $700 back, I was like, how the hell he do that?
How did he do that?
You know what I'm saying? Then I found out.
Right.
Damn.
Right.
I was spending $300, making $700 back. You know?
Turn 7 to a 14.
I love you guys know, if you walk into my office, you see a picture of Notorious B.I.G. because, like, for me, like, that was the dude that was like, oh man, this dude is special. You know what I'm saying? Like, he just transcended what the game was going to be about. And then, of course, obviously, he ended up having an unusual connection with Tupac, which ultimately ended up with both of them losing their lives, unfortunately. Like, I often wonder, like, what the game would have been like if they both had lived, you know?
I'm just wondering if they would have been respected still. And don't take it the wrong way, but they were and are legends. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I say we also got to give flowers to the people that's still around. Not since we lost Nip, but that's like a double down on tuition into the school of experience, where we'll look at somebody that had a longer career or that's doing something, it's like, oh, that old, you know, N-word, you know, as opposed to like, man, he survived it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. He been putting on for years. He's been doing his thing, you know. So I think also with Biggie and Pac, with them being cut down at such an early age, that people didn't get to where they could have said something even more negative. You know what I'm saying? And gave them the accolades that they deserved. Because sometimes, man, when we make it past something, or when we get a little bit older, we don't even want to hear from us anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We put an expiration date on success
you're
or
right.
creativity and shit like that, man. So, and now I'm starting to even see people that's disrespecting those legends. You know what I'm saying? That's why we got to continue to keep, keep our finger on the pulse.
I think that what you were saying about how they got their lives shortened, you know what I'm saying? I think, and it's sad to say, but I do think we immortalize people when tragedy happens in that way.
Yeah.
And like, I was too young. My cousins and my uncles and stuff were like devastated when Pac got killed.
Yeah.
You know, being from here, Biggie obviously on your side, but then I couldn't relate to that emotionally because I wasn't connected to Pac. Now I didn't know him. I didn't have his
But
number.
you
in my
just felt
phone.
it recently.
And then so when we lost Nip, like I remember talking to both of you guys, actually all three of y'all, about it, and it was just like I felt that shit because Nip was in my, like Big told me one day, he was like, you feel different because Nip was in your phone.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it was just like, fuck. Like, so I totally understand and can relate to the pain and the trauma that comes from a loss of a Biggie or Tupac because it directly affected me.
It not just messed up the game or the coast. When we lost Pac and Big, man, you just felt it. You know what I'm saying? It was like, this is before social media, and it just shook the world. I remember, man, having to be the one to come on air and tell Los Angeles we lost Pac. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And coming on, we lost Biggie on a weekend, coming in that Monday, and what that felt like.
Yep.
And seeing Biggie a couple weeks before, and people were like, oh, you want to get a picture? I was like, oh, man, it wasn't a couple weeks. I was like, oh, man, I said, he's coming to the show. Yeah. I'll grab a picture with him then, not knowing that I wasn't going to see him again.
You never think that way. I actually saw Nip's, this is before Warner and Atlantic moved. So this would have been March of this year. I saw him coming out of the Warner building, and I was taken aback by the fact that he was walking by himself.
Yeah.
And every time you see Nips, he was just a warm individual.
Yeah,
you
man.
knew he was a good dude. We shook hands and whatnot, and said what's up. And then I think we were talking about the fact that he was coming to do your show a couple of days after. But to this day, I just remember being like, man, he was just walking by himself.
Yeah, man.
Nobody with him, but
Such
just
a good dude. And that's the same with Big to me and Pac. You know what I'm saying? Like, character is what's being said about you when you're not in the room.
Yeah.
And you said some beautiful things. I knew Pac, I knew Big. I knew Pac before I got into radio, you know what I'm saying? And I was in radio early enough to push Biggie through as well. You know what I'm saying? With Puff and everything. So, I look at hip hop now and just music in general, man. I feel the upswing, as it continues with, even on our R&B levels. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love what Chris is doing. I love that people are getting back into singing and serenading. I love that the ladies are getting on, with LMA and her. It's like, it's just a good time, man. And I remember being in LA, Doc, and you know this probably, Chuck and Head, y'all younger, but I remember what the audience used to look like at shows.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I would go to the Long Beach Fresh Fest and it was all black, and then this thing called hip hop was pushing, and it was hours from the hood and this, that. Then you see your Latino and your Mexican brothers and sisters getting in, and now it's the biggest genre. I remember one time I was driving by the Rose Bowl, and I looked and I said to my wife, I said, if I recorded this crowd, you wouldn't know what concert we were at.
Exactly.
And we were at a Jay-Z Beyonce concert, but the crowd looked totally different.
Remember that period where anytime anything happened at a show, the news always labeled it gangster rap?
Gangsta rap
Used to
man.
piss me off.
Violence breaks out at peace rally.
But
I'm like,
now all of those reporters, their kids fuck with hip hop.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden that term has just disappeared, man.
Out here, we received, well, in my, I can only speak from my perspective. We received Jay-Z a little different. Like, we received when he we didn't. I don't think we really embraced Jay-Z in my generation until later on. I would say the Blueprint.
You agree?
Around.
You agree?
Just for me, my generation.
No, because I was on air and LA fucked with Jay-Z.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like for real.
From the jump.
Pretty much from the giddy.
Yeah.
From the
I
giddy,
think it's
man.
a generational thing
Yeah.
because honestly, even from my perspective too, I like Jay-Z, but I didn't embrace it until probably after the high school years because of the whole Pac. I was really like we were really influenced by Pac and Big.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, East Coast versus West Coast, and it sounds stupid now.
Yes.
But I remember when Biggie passed, it was just like, oh, for real? Like, it wasn't as an emotional attachment as it was when Pac died. Right. Obviously, years later, we grew up.
See, I knew Big and I knew Pac.
Yeah.
So it was just different for me. And then I was in a position where I was like, damn, we lost them both.
Yeah.
Like, who won?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, who the fuck won? So it was just different. But also when Jay-Z was hitting, it was just like a swing of things, man. You know, you had a lot of the Bad Boy stuff, so we was rocking with it. But then at that point, man, we were heavy West Coast too. I mean, we were banging Cube, Dub, and Mac 10 and Quick, and you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
If Second to None dropped something, you know, it was like we were pressing play on hip hop records. We still had car shows.
Warren,
we were still
Nate.
cruising. Warren, Nate, like not even thinking about what Death Row did. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like that whole Death Row roster.
Yeah. So
was
Easy
pretty much.
Easy the first hip hop casualty here in LA? Was it?
That I would say that we felt that way.
Yeah.
It hit. It hit.
Well, he didn't
Definitely.
die like, you know, he
wasn't
wasn't murdered.
tragedy.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Me personally, I feel like it's always different when somebody's murdered.
Yeah.
Right.
Like how,
But it was also where it was instant. It was like, wait, what?
It was like,
what
right.
about Easy? You know, and we had just seen him, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then the visual and the countdown. So it wasn't like how Nip got murdered and you just felt that. We felt robbed because we didn't go through a slow process of we about to lose Eazy-E or we about to, you know what I'm saying? It was like boom, boom, damn, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And watching people at the hospital, and it was a difference between Googling something or having a recollection of something or I heard versus the feeling of when you were right there in the moment. So it was messed up, man. And it was a lot of, man, did you know? It was a lot of conversation.
You got to think about it. That was 95, 96, and 97,
Yeah,
just
man.
back to back to back.
Hey, when did you guys first start to hear hip hop infiltrate, you know, popular culture? Like hear it at a Laker game or something? Because I remember being at basketball games in Madison Square Garden. If there was one thing that you weren't going to hear was hip hop, you were going to hear everything
Really?
else. Oh man, they didn't play that.
I
But,
think
you know, I'm talking about the
Oh
80s and 90s.
No, I
you
think
know,
for me, I remember because I went to high school out in Cerritos, so my mom didn't want me to go to my home school, and that's when
Why? Getting your ass whooped over there.
well, no, I was you know, I was a little
West Coast.
I was bad in you know, as a kid and whatnot,
Right.
but I feel like when I started to see, and this is gonna sound really bad, but when I started to see people that weren't of color.
Yeah.
And they were like going to the shows, and like I couldn't afford to go, so they would tell me about it. So now I'm getting a telephone game of what happened at the hip hop show from somebody not of color, and it was just like, oh shit.
Yeah,
So it's like, what do you know about that?
yeah,
And it's
exactly.
like, so I think that was my first way to identify like this is spreading beyond just some hood.
I started to see it more so too, Doc, when it was like, it was in hours, you know, it was like, oh, that's the hip hop station. And it was looked at the wrong way. Like, oh, that's the hip hop, oh, you know.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing like, okay, wait, what the fuck? Kiss playing Snoop?
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, I
like,
remember those
but we not
moments,
over
too.
here playing
Right.
no fucking Britney Spears
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Backstreet Boys.
Yeah.
So when the genres start going that way and you start seeing, you know, either collabs or you start looking at commercials and they Reynolds rapping and shit, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, wow.
I remember seeing Nelly like doing stuff because Eminem was a little too rough at the time. But I remember seeing Nelly doing stuff with NSYNC and different people like that. And then when I started to see them get incorporated into the award shows, I was like, okay, we here.
Right.
Because the award shows is like the pinnacle of the performances. It wasn't like a regular concert. Your fans come to see you. This is you being exposed to everyone's audience. You know, and it wasn't just a niche thing. It wasn't just, oh, that's that hip hop shit.
I think it was a little late for me, but when we saw Outkast get the Grammy, the best album of the year. It was just like, oh, okay, this is for sure. And at that point, obviously, that's
you
the
remember when
hype.
they didn't even let us in the categories.
That's
And
crazy.
then when they didn't even televise the category. You
So
know,
it was like that was when it was like, okay, it's really, really accepted at this point when they got that album of the year.
Also, 3 6 Mafia won. They won a
the Oscar. Yeah.
I was like, damn, because
Yeah,
that's not
man.
music.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
That was kind of crazy too.
There was somebody that year still saying, man, fuck them.
Yeah, right.
We lost to who?
Right.
The Mafia.
Right.
Like, man.
Yeah,
you
I think
remember
that was.
when they went on stage? I was like,
Oh,
yeah.
man. You know what I love about 3 6 Mafia? They did it their way.
Yeah, they didn't give a shit.
They went for hard out there for a pimp. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like what the fuck?
Yeah.
And then they were hitting.
that.
I remember, like a bunch of my homies was telling me they was hitting the clubs with the
Oh
Oscar.
man, I got
of
pictures
course,
with their
of
Oscar.
course.
Really?
That's the
outta
first
here.
and last Oscar I ever held. They walked around with that Oscar, bro.
Yeah.
Put that Oscar on the Hennessy table. Like,
It's funny because when you see Juicy now, like you don't get any of that. He's just the calmest, nicest dude in the world.
yeah, they were
man.
wildin', boy. There's music that was just good for the soul. Like my brother Keith, rest in peace. Like just what I got from him in music, man. Like, all my, Temptations, Four Tops, Supremes, like my love of music. And then you go into like, Barcades, Commodores, Parliament Funkadelic. It was like I enjoy so-called black music.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't think we get the accolades for music.
Correct.
Like we had a long conversation about hip hop,
Right. Right.
But
Music.
man,
Oh,
what
man.
that felt like.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's songs like I was listening to something, right? And I was with my boy Jose, and when I did the years, I was like, oh my God, this song is over 40 years old. But it's still every test of time.
Yeah.
There's records that were just that was just good for the soul.
Yeah.
Like I was at an appearance, and Ty Hollywood, one of our guys here, he had put a record on, and I'm trying to remember what it was, and just watching this girl that was like 12 sing it.
Really?
It was My Girl.
Oh, Temptations.
Yes. And I was like, what he put that on? She ain't gonna.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, she
she
sang
started,
it.
the
Reaction.
crowd started
Yeah.
singing. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
But that's the jewels of black music that was just continued to be handed down to us. You know what I'm
I
saying?
love him, and sometimes I feel like I love when you guys crack on my age, but I really feel like you guys have missed like part of the journey. Like back in the 70s,
Oh, yeah.
69, 70, Ed Sullivan had a TV show, and back then we had like 2-3 channels, man. I remember him introducing the Jackson 5 and saying, look at this guy Mike, this little one named Michael when he comes out.
And Joe was over there like, it's the Jackson 5. Why you separating my boys?
And when that guy came on stage, I
that's
mean,
your
my
final.
heart leapt because I'd never seen anyone with that much talent.
Yeah.
And the way that he conducted himself on stage, it was,
Dude.
and it's a shame that these incredibly talented people typically end up leaving us in a tragic way. We're not
Yeah,
able
man.
to grab them and say, hey, stay normal.
Yeah.
But like you knew that this kid was.
Because you look at just Prince, Michael, Whitney, and then you can go on and on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You can go on and on.
That's crazy. I never thought about it
Yeah,
from that
man.
perspective.
Yeah, man.
Do you think that that's grim? Do you think that in order for us to appreciate somebody, they have to pass?
It depends on who you are and what that whole appreciation is. You know what I'm saying? Like there's music and there's artists that I appreciate and they're here. The masses, like when I was talking with Master P, and Master P was like, when Victory Lap dropped, he said it sold 52,000 copies.
Right.
And that's P, that's not me fact checking, and he was like, it was a great album. And it's the same album after he passed that went to millions upon millions of streams. You know what I'm saying? So whatever it is, if that's the introduction or if that's when Michael passed, they said his sales went up over 1,000%.
Yeah.
I mean, you some people get intrigued. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember driving to work one day, and when I worked at Power, and they were playing this song, and I was like, dude, what's this song that we're playing that's not hip hop? And it was when Selena passed.
Yeah.
And when Selena passed, it was like, that was more of an introduction to her, because when she passed, I studied more of this story and who she was and what she meant, you know, not for my audience, but just for my soul. I was like, man, you know, she was so young. And so I think with Nip and with the Pox and with, you know, the Marvin Gayes, like, I think we start to dig into it a little bit more when there's a story. When you watch boxing, when that backstory, like, oh man, I want to see him win.
Right,
you know,
right.
It's amazing. We see that so much in radio. You know, a lot of us, especially in sizable markets, we use our research to gauge songs. And I know for a fact that Michael and Whitney, because their songs were so overexposed, they never would reach the criteria where we would play many of their songs because they would score less than, you know, the rest of the group. And upon the death of both of them, their records just
Even
went
with
through the roof.
Mike, like,
Yeah, man.
Wow.
Michael Jackson's records, for the most part, would seldom be played on urban adult radio stations. Maybe Man in the Mirror would test, but all of the other records were kind of watered down.
Yeah.
And they just didn't test. And then after his death, like,
this guy.
it's
so
crazy
many
the
of them.
evolution of music too, because now there's just some things where you're like, damn, radio probably wouldn't even play that now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not gonna slide out of Middle Child and be, your bud is mine. I'm gonna make the fight.
Right,
I'm
right.
gonna show you. You know what I'm saying? Even
Yeah.
a Billie Jean or
Right,
something. You're like,
yeah.
man, those are legendary records.
yeah.
But the sign of the time now, it's like, it's totally different, man.
I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about something recent that happened that was crazy. It was the whole Lil Nas X thing.
Yeah, man.
So here's a black guy that's like 20-something years old, and for all intents and purposes, puts out a country record, right? Record soars to the top, and then the country format said, nope.
No,
we don't want
we
that.
reject your deposit.
Yep.
Like,
That's
what?
not
Are
country
you
music.
That's not country music.
like, are you kidding me? Like, seriously? Like, you just like rejected this dude based on what?
And they did that on the charts,
Yes.
like the authority. There's stuff that we'll sit down and say, man, that ain't hip hop.
Yeah.
But we, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
if it's
gonna
on the
take
chart,
it
it's
over
on the
here
chart.
with
Yeah.
Like we ain't been gangster enough, but we just say, man, take that off the
Exactly.
chart.
Move this
Off
to
the
that.
chart.
Yeah,
the
man.
craziest thing ever, man. And it really hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves because it was blatant racism.
Oh
man.
yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that I do
If he
want
had been a Caucasian guy going, I want to take my horse down the hill, and did the same song, got the horses in the back.
Yeah.
They be like,
Yeah.
oh, this is
it's
genius.
the best shit ever.
Yeah.
I do want to also, because it is black music, I do want to salute like Billy Ray Cyrus and different
Yeah,
people
I
like
think
that
he's
for
amazing.
stepping up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And really embracing, like, no, I'm gonna go ahead and embrace you, just like
Yeah.
you know, hip hop. We let everybody in.
Absolutely.
yeah.
We let everybody in.
We
And
let
I-
him in, we let him on, we let him.
So I just think that when things like that happen, like it was blatant, obviously discrimination, but I feel like there are certain people who's like, no, I'm not going for that.
Yeah.
And they embraced, you know, the black
And I
music
think
thing.
also, man, you know, the controversy of it too, you know, it was one of the best moves, you know, for him as well. He took it, he ran with it,
Yeah.
he did his interviews, he talked about it, and the record, you know, he got Billy Ray Cyrus on the remix. The record blew up. It did even better
yeah.
than on that chart.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And it's an introduction for a lot of other people to hip hop.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what's his follow-ups
Exactly.
are going to be.
He better have
because
one.
he giving it all in.
Right.
Everything is a cowboy hat. You know what I'm saying?
Next
We
Like,
got
gonna
an
be.
EP coming out. I actually talked to the label yesterday. I was like, please have another hit on this record. I
Yeah.
really want to see him do well. Because you've seen it. You remember when we got here in 2015, like, what's his name from New York, man? Fetty Wap.
Yep.
Oh man.
When was the last time you said Fetty Wap's name, man?
yeah.
Like, that's
And you know what's crazy
crazy
about
to
Fetty
me.
to me, man? I felt like Fetty was going to be around for a long time. People messed with him.
Yep.
And he was he was like, to me, Festival Fetty. Like, he could have stayed.
Yep.
I think also, like, the difference between our first interview and our last interview, it seemed like, and I never had a conversation with him about it, it seemed like he just got tired of
Tired of
of
it.
music,
Yeah.
the business. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It just, I don't know. It wasn't about material and output. It just seemed like he just gassed out on his
You
own.
did
like,
well. It is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about it, just when they come here to do our 3-4 stations, they could do 3-4 interviews on our station
Right.
alone.
One.
You
Yeah,
know,
right,
then
right.
have to go across the street, and
Unless
that's
you
just
Lamar
one.
Odom and you tell him I gotta go.
Exactly.
Lamar was like, "Hey, I gotta go." I was like, "Damn."
Deuces.
No, I do think
Deuces.
I'm not saying this is what happened with Fetty, but I do think people look at black music, or not even just black hip hop in general, as a quick flip. Like they get in it, I'm gonna guap up, stack up, get my money, and I'm good.
Yeah.
And I think that we're like probably one of the only music genres that people look at it as a hustle. Like as a flip, it's not right.
Yeah.
It's not like a career where you invest in you vocal lessons. Like R&B, you have
Like
vocal
people
lessons.
don't
You got
go in and
choreographers.
say, man, you know what? I think I'm just gonna be a rock musician.
And just in
You
and
know what
out.
I'm saying?
Right,
People
yeah.
be like, man, like what? Hold on, I'm a rapper now.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
you know, she bringing out an album. He bringing out an album.
Social media's probably had a
Yeah.
huge impact on it too,
course,
because
yeah,
you
of
used to be able to go away and then come back, and now you walk down the street, Meek getting arrested for what Meek do? He got on a bicycle or
Yeah,
something
popped
like
the
that,
wheelie.
popped the
Popped the
wheelie. Like it's
Something as simple as that.
it's insane.
I
man.
think that I don't want to get too far into it, but I think the discrimination on black music is something that we need to have more dialogue about openly, because I think it's a taboo topic. Like you saying, obviously with Lil Nas X, Meek, it's different people that kind of constantly are in the spotlight for different things. I just saw something, maybe you could speak on it. In New York, they just had a division of cops that they basically acknowledged the hip hop cop. Like, oh, this is a thing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and it's like, I mean, y'all obviously have been around and seen it. I haven't personally had my run-ins with them, but I know that it's a thing, and I think that, I'm not saying black people are being targeted, but the genre is definitely being
Oh
targeted.
yeah,
Oh,
oh yeah,
absolutely.
oh yeah. We just saw
Absolutely.
that recently with Meek at the Cosmopolitan.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's definitely holds a jacket to it. You know, it's black enough, but then they don't. It's not owned enough by us. You know, it's like
Still want you to stay in your place.
yeah,
if you will.
that's the, you know, I'll open up a store and sell you stuff in your hood, but I ain't gonna live in your hood. You know what I'm saying? So it not it is what it is, like it just pass off, but it is what it is. You know.
So I guess to wrap up, just briefly give like your highlight when you think about black music, whether it be hip hop, R&B, in your career. Like, what is I know you guys have had a great relationship with Kendrick. Like, what's that thing for you? You say, yo, I was here when this happened.
For me, I'm definitely going to go back to that moment of seeing, Kendrick in my living room talking about, wanting to do music and what his plans were 5-6 years from that moment, which was 2009, 2010. And literally everything that he talked about he wanted to do is happening and some. Him being one of the most influential artists in the game as of right now. And just being there for that moment to kind of see and kind of usher him in and just be there to champion him. So, I mean, I think that's a testament to black music for sure.
Yeah. Big?
What?
What's that signature moment for you in your 25-year radio career in Los
Just
Angeles?
in radio?
As it pertains to black music.
Just press and play for the first time on what other people feel is legendary now.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like sitting in and looking at Pac, looking at Big, seeing this thing with the Source Awards and Death Row and, like actually being there with things that people have to Google. And seeing, the rise of Death Row, the rise of Bad Boy, being here long enough to see NWA as who's this? Finding out what NWA was for the first time at the Rhodium Swap Meet. And then going to the premiere for Straight Outta Compton. You know what I'm saying? It's just been crazy, man, being a fan first and press and play on things that are just legendary. And talking to some of our soldiers, and even with Craig Mack, rapping back and forth with him when I did the night show, and Craig passing. You know what I'm saying? It's like just being a part of that. And outside of music, you have those shows where it's like, man, the Pac show, the 9/11 show, when my mom passed, that show, the Nipsey show now. And all that comes back to being in the building that was under the hip hop genre, under the hip hop flag. You know what I'm saying? So that's always been crazy to me, that people say, when I heard about such and such, I heard it from you. When I first heard this record, I heard it on your station. So just being a part of it, man, it's crazy.
What about you?
So he's gonna take us back to Sam Cooke. So,
I'm not going back that far.
No, it's
did you write for him?
two things stand out to me. One is when Kendrick got the key to the city in Compton. That was a testament to like all the stuff we have built and been talking about for years. And I remember sitting on Mayor, shout out to Mayor Asia Brown, but I was sitting on her desk, and Kendrick's holding his thing, and I'm just like, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, this is crazy." And I was like, You telling me this is crazy. You know what I'm saying?
This is the dude that held awards.
Right.
And holding the key to his city.
Right.
It's like, wow.
This is crazy. And so going back to when we was doing radio in Chuck's apartment, it's just seeing people not accept him, call him a weirdo, you know, people telling us not to support TDE and all that. So long story short, I think that's one of the moments. The other moment for me is seeing when Nip dropped Victory Lap and he sold out the Palladium, you know, in Hollywood. And it was a sold out show, and it was just about Nipsey.
Yeah.
It wasn't like oh, he got special guests. It wasn't he brought Imani on stage. Like it was just like it was a celebratory thing because going through the whole process of him trying to get that was his debut album. Yeah. Like nobody understands that he had dropped albums, quote unquote projects before that, but that was his masterpiece. That was his victory lap. And I feel like that show and seeing all those people there for him was like, that shit was beautiful to me, like just to be a part of that process.
And what about you, Doc?
I think for me, man, it's just watching black music and especially hip hop get to a point where it was no longer like that thing that you played one or two records at a college frat party. It was like, oh, this is hilarious.
Yeah.
Like it's now
Can you
really
play Baby Got Back?
Exactly. Remember those? It's really the fabric of our culture now, and people have had to accept that, and of course they're going to continue to be the Lil Nas X experiences where he gets booted out of a format, but man, it's here to stay. And some of those people, like your daughters are growing up and their favorite artist is name that black artist, and you got to accept it. You know, it's real, man. And I mean, I've seen a lot of that, man. I remember taking Usher on his first promo tour in St. Louis in '91. He was 13.
That's crazy.
And trying to figure out, is this dude gonna make it? Because you know he was with his mom and his driver, and he was amped. And I'm like, man, I hope this little dude makes it because he wants to be a star.
He putting it all in.
Yeah, and
it's
and
crazy when you look in the rearview mirror and it's like, I knew it. You know what I'm saying? I knew it. You know.
Yeah. So man, it's great to be having a conversation with you guys about Black Music Month, man. It's great to be in Los Angeles after having worked in New York and St. Louis, and now being in LA and being able to share these experiences with you guys. So hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. Big ups to Hennessy. Happen to have a little during the conversation.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? I'm about to go in and negotiate my contract now. Going to take that to the head, Doc. Go on in here, close a deal up with you.
Yeah.
Y'all